If I had dropped that pizza 1 second later, my life would have stayed mine. Rain hammered against the streets of downtown Chicago hard enough to blur the traffic lights into bleeding streaks of red and gold across Ethan Miller's windshield. His delivery scooter rattled beneath him every time he hit another pothole, the old engine coughing like it was seconds away from giving up entirely. The insulated pizza bag strapped to his back felt heavier with every block he passed, soaked from the freezing October rain despite the plastic covering he'd wrapped around it earlier. Midnight deliveries always paid extra, and tonight he needed every dollar he could get. Rent was overdue. Again. His younger sister's asthma medication sat untouched at the pharmacy because he hadn't been able to afford the refill. And the electricity bill taped to the fridge at home had a bright red final notice stamped across the top like a threat waiting to happen. So Ethan kept driving through the storm even though his fingers had gone numb 30 minutes ago. His phone buzzed violently in the pocket of his rain jacket. "Where the hell are you?" his manager barked the second Ethan answered through his helmet speaker. "That order is VIP priority." Ethan tightened his grip on the handlebars as a black SUV splashed icy water across his jeans. "I'm 5 minutes away." "You said that 10 minutes ago." "There's flooding on Wacker." "I don't care if Noah's Ark is floating down the damn street. You deliver this order hot or don't bother coming back tomorrow." The line went dead. Ethan let out a slow breath through clenched teeth. He should have quit this job months ago. The problem was that nobody else hired Omegas who tried this hard to hide what they were. Even with scent suppressants running through his system daily, people still noticed things. The way customers looked twice at him sometimes. The way certain alphas stared too long. The way managers suddenly became uncomfortable after hiring him. So he kept his head down. Delivered pizzas. Pretended to be invisible. A gust of freezing wind nearly pushed his scooter sideways as he turned onto Lexington Avenue. Then he saw it. Vail Tower. 57 stories of black glass and silver steel slicing into the storm clouds like something unreal. The glowing Vail logo near the top of the building was recognizable from almost anywhere in the city. Everyone knew Vail Dynamics. Everyone knew Adrian Vail. Billionaire CEO. Corporate genius. America's youngest tech mogul. The kind of man people talked about in lowered voices even when he wasn't around. Ethan pulled into the private entrance beneath the tower's massive overhang and parked beside a row of luxury vehicles worth more than everything he'd owned in his entire life combined. Rainwater dripped from his soaked hair into his eyes as he hurried toward the entrance carrying the pizza bag against his chest. The lobby was enormous. Quiet. Cold. Marble floors reflected the crystal chandeliers overhead like frozen water. Even at almost 1 a.m, people in tailored suits moved quickly through the lobby with tablets and phones pressed to their ears. Ethan instantly felt out of place standing there in damp sneakers and a cheap delivery jacket with grease stains on the sleeves. The security guard behind the desk barely glanced at him. "Delivery?" Ethan nodded. "Penthouse executive floor." The guard frowned slightly. "That late?" Ethan lifted the receipt. "Order says priority delivery." Before the guard could answer, the atmosphere inside the lobby shifted. Ethan felt it before he understood it. Conversation stopped. Footsteps slowed. Even the air itself seemed heavier somehow. Several employees standing near the elevators immediately straightened their posture like soldiers reacting to a command. Then the elevator doors opened. Adrian Vail stepped out wearing a charcoal gray overcoat over a black suit so sharply tailored it barely looked real. Tall. Broad shoulders. Dark hair slightly damp from the weather outside. His expression calm in a way that made the entire room nervous around him. Ethan had seen photos online before, but they didn't come close to the reality of standing 10 feet away from him. Adrian Vail didn't walk like other people. He moved like someone completely certain the world would move aside for him. And it did. Employees lowered their eyes. Security guards went rigid. Nobody spoke. Ethan tried not to stare. He adjusted the pizza bag against his shoulder and stepped backward at the exact same moment someone rushed past him from behind. His foot slipped on rainwater still clinging to the marble floor. Everything happened at once. The pizza box slammed forward out of Ethan's hands. The lid burst open. Hot cheese and sauce splattered directly across the front of Adrian Vale's black coat. A soda cup hit the floor beside them and exploded across polished marble with a crack loud enough to echo through the entire lobby. Silence. Absolute silence. Ethan froze. His heartbeat stopped so hard it hurt. Oh God. Oh no. The entire lobby stared at him in horror. One of the assistants near the elevator physically covered her mouth with her hand. Ethan scrambled backward immediately, panic flooding his chest. "I'm so sorry," he blurted out. "I slipped, I didn't mean." Security moved instantly. 2 guards closed in toward him from both sides. "Sir, step away." Ethan's stomach dropped. He could already imagine it. Fired. Blacklisted. Sued for damages he could never afford. He bent down shakily to grab napkins from his jacket pocket, hands trembling so badly he nearly dropped them. "I can clean it," he said quickly. "Please, I'll pay for the coat somehow." Then Adrian Vale looked at him. Gray eyes. Cold and sharp enough to pin Ethan in place without effort. Ethan forgot how to breathe. And for one impossible second, beneath the scent of rain and expensive cologne and warm pizza filling the lobby air, Ethan saw something shift in Adrian's expression. Not anger. Recognition. The security guard stopped moving when Adrian raised one hand slightly. Just a small gesture. But everyone obeyed instantly. Adrian's gaze stayed fixed on Ethan's face with unsettling focus. Then lower. Toward the scent patch barely hidden beneath Ethan's damp jacket collar. Ethan's blood turned cold. The adhesive. The rain must have loosened it. No. No, no, no. Adrian stepped closer once. Ethan's instincts screamed before his brain could catch up. Alpha. Powerful. Dangerous. Every suppressant in Ethan's system suddenly felt too weak. Adrian's voice, when he finally spoke, was low and calm enough to make the silence around them even worse. "You," he said quietly, staring directly into Ethan's terrified eyes. "Come upstairs with me." The elevator doors closed with a soft metallic sound that somehow felt louder than the thunder outside. Ethan stood frozen near the back wall, clutching the ruined pizza bag against his chest while rainwater dripped from the edge of his jacket onto the polished black floor. Nobody else had entered with them. Not the security guards. Not the assistants. Just him and Adrian Vale alone inside a private elevator rising through one of the most expensive buildings in Chicago. Ethan could hear his own heartbeat over the quiet hum of the elevator cables. Adrian stood several feet away facing forward, one hand in the pocket of his dark overcoat, the other loosely holding his phone. The ruined stain of tomato sauce still spread across the front of his suit jacket, but he did not seem remotely bothered by it. That almost made it worse. Ethan had dealt with angry customers before. People yelling over cold food. Rich businessmen throwing $20 bills at him like insults. But Adrian Vale's silence felt dangerous in a completely different way. The digital numbers above the elevator climbed higher. 27. 32. 39. Ethan swallowed hard. "Look," he said quietly, forcing himself to speak. "I really am sorry about your coat." Adrian did not answer immediately. "Do you always apologize before someone accuses you?" Ethan blinked. The question caught him off guard. "What?" Adrian finally looked toward him. "You apologized before security even touched you." Ethan shifted uncomfortably under the weight of those gray eyes. "People usually blamed the delivery guy first." Something unreadable flickered across Adrian's face before he looked forward again. Silence returned. Ethan's fingers tightened around the pizza bag strap. The scent patch beneath his collar felt loose against his skin now. Too loose. The rain had nearly peeled one edge off completely. Panic stirred low in his stomach. He carefully adjusted his jacket higher without drawing attention to it. Or, at least he tried to. Adrian noticed anyway. Of course he noticed. "You are nervous," Adrian said calmly. Ethan forced out a weak laugh. I accidentally threw pizza at one of the richest men in America. That is not why. The elevator slowed smoothly before stopping. Floor 47. The doors opened directly into a massive private hallway lined with dark marble and low golden lighting. No reception desk. No employees. Just silence and luxury so polished it barely looked real. Adrian stepped out first. Ethan hesitated only half a second before following because staying alone inside the elevator somehow felt even worse. The penthouse office looked less like a workplace and more like the inside of some futuristic hotel. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the storm-covered skyline stretching endlessly beyond the glass. Lightning flashed somewhere over Lake Michigan, illuminating the room in cold silver for one brief second. Ethan tried not to stare too much at anything. The piano near the windows probably cost more than his apartment building. Adrian removed his overcoat slowly and draped it over the back of a chair before loosening the cuffs of his sleeves. Sit. Ethan immediately shook his head. I should probably go. Adrian looked at him again. Calm. Controlled. You are soaked through and the storm warning just upgraded to severe flooding conditions. As if on cue, thunder rattled against the glass windows hard enough to make Ethan jump slightly. Adrian noticed that too. Ethan looked toward the city below. Rain hammered the streets in sheets so dense the traffic lights looked underwater. His scooter was still parked outside somewhere beneath all that weather. Great. He was probably going to lose that too. I can still leave, Ethan muttered weakly. Adrian walked toward a built-in bar along the far wall and poured a glass of water without asking. Your hands are shaking. Ethan glanced down. They were. He quickly shoved them into the pockets of his jacket. I am fine. Adrian set the water glass down on the counter between them. You nearly panicked the moment I stepped close to you downstairs. Ethan's chest tightened instantly. I did not. You did. Adrian's voice never rose. That somehow made every word heavier. Why? Ethan looked away first. The city lights blurred through the rain outside. He needed to leave. Now. Before the suppressants failed completely. Before Adrian got any closer. The problem was that his body had already started reacting. The expensive penthouse air carried Adrian's scent much more clearly than the crowded lobby downstairs had. Cedarwood. Smoke. Something darker underneath it that Ethan could not explain but instinctively recognized anyway. Alpha. Powerful alpha. The kind Omegas learned to avoid early in life if they wanted peace. Ethan's pulse stumbled unevenly. He reached subtly toward the inside pocket of his jacket where his emergency suppressant tablets were stored. Empty. His stomach dropped. Right. He had taken the last one 6 hours ago. Adrian noticed the movement instantly. What are you looking for? Nothing. You are a terrible liar. Ethan exhaled sharply. Why am I even here? Adrian studied him for several long seconds before answering. Because the moment you walked into that lobby, every instinct I have told me something was wrong. Ethan's throat tightened. I do not know what that means. Neither do I. That answer surprised him enough to look back up. Adrian leaned one hand against the marble counter, eyes still fixed entirely on Ethan. But I know you are hiding something. Ethan's breath caught when Adrian took one slow step closer. Not aggressive. Not threatening. Somehow worse because of how controlled it was. Your scent blockers are failing, Adrian said quietly. Ethan's blood went ice cold. His hand flew instinctively toward his collar too late. Adrian's gaze dropped briefly toward the loose edge of the patch hidden beneath Ethan's damp jacket. Then back to his face. Do not panic, Adrian said calmly. Ethan already was. Every survival instinct inside him screamed at once. Leave. Run. Get out now. But the storm outside roared against the windows like the city itself had sealed shut around the tower. And Adrian Vale still stood between Ethan and the elevator with that same unreadable expression in his gray eyes. Who are you really? Adrian asked. Softly. Ethan's voice came out almost as a whisper. Just a pizza delivery guy. Adrian stared at him for another long moment before speaking again. No, he said quietly. You are not. The storm outside intensified hard enough to shake faint vibrations through the glass walls of the penthouse. Rain streaked endlessly down the windows behind Adrian Vale, turning the Chicago skyline into a distorted blur of silver and black. Ethan could barely focus on it anymore. His entire body had locked into survival mode the second Adrian mentioned the scent blockers. Nobody was supposed to notice them. Not unless they got close enough. Not unless the suppressants were already failing badly. Ethan took one careful step backward. Then another. I should leave now, he said quietly, forcing steadiness into his voice even though his pulse was spiraling out of control. Adrian did not move aside from the counter. You are afraid of me. You are a billionaire alpha who somehow noticed scent blockers through a rainstorm. Ethan swallowed hard. What exactly am I supposed to feel? A flicker of something almost amused crossed Adrian's face before disappearing again. Fair point. Ethan stared at him in disbelief. The man sounded completely calm while Ethan felt seconds away from collapsing under the pressure filling the room. It was not physical pressure. It was instinct. Something deeper and older than logic. Every Omega learned early how dangerous certain alphas could feel without ever raising their voice. Adrian Vale radiated that kind of presence naturally. Controlled. Quiet. Absolute. Ethan hated that his body reacted to it automatically. Another pulse of thunder rolled across the city. The lights overhead dimmed briefly before stabilizing again. Ethan flinched harder this time. Adrian noticed immediately. You do not like storms? I do not like being trapped on the 47th floor with someone who keeps staring at me like a science experiment. Adrian tilted his head slightly at that. Interesting comparison. Ethan regretted the words instantly. Look, thank you for not throwing me out downstairs, but I really need to go home. To where? Ethan froze. Adrian picked up Ethan's soaked delivery receipt from the marble counter where he had apparently placed it earlier. The address listed here is in South Halstead. Ethan's stomach tightened. You looked at that? It was attached to the pizza box. Adrian's gaze lifted calmly. That neighborhood flooded an hour ago. Ethan immediately grabbed for his phone. No signal. Great. Of course there was no signal this high up in the middle of a storm. My sister is home alone, he said quickly. I need to check on her. Adrian studied him for a moment too long. How old? Ethan hesitated before answering. 17. Something in Adrian's expression shifted slightly again. Less cold this time. Or maybe Ethan imagined it. Call her from the landline. Adrian gestured toward the desk across the room. Ethan stared suspiciously. You just have a random landline in a penthouse office? It is connected to satellite service. Right. Billionaires probably prepared for the apocalypse differently than normal people. Ethan moved carefully toward the desk while keeping distance between them. The scent in the room grew stronger the closer he moved through the penthouse. Cedarwood. Smoke. Clean, expensive cologne layered over something warmer underneath. His suppressants were definitely failing now because he could detect every detail too clearly. That was bad. Very bad. He picked up the sleek black phone on the desk and dialed home immediately. The line rang twice. Ethan? Relief nearly buckled his knees. Lily. Oh my God, where are you? The news said downtown is flooding. I am okay. He glanced briefly toward Adrian standing near the windows. Watching him. I got stuck delivering an order. Your boss is seriously making you work in this weather? Ethan laughed weakly despite himself. You know Tony. I hate Tony. Yeah. Me too. Her breathing softened slightly on the other end. The power flickered twice here already. Ethan rubbed tiredly at his forehead. Lock the windows in the kitchen, okay? Already did. A pause. You sound weird. Ethan looked toward Adrian again automatically. Their eyes met instantly. Long night, Ethan answered quietly. You ate dinner yet? Cereal. Ethan. Sighed. That is not dinner. It counts if I put strawberries in it. Despite everything happening around him, Ethan smiled faintly. Adrian's gaze sharpened slightly at the expression. I will be home when the road's clear, Ethan promised. Do not open the door for anyone. I know. Her voice softened. Be careful. Ethan hung up slowly after she disconnected. The silence inside the penthouse returned almost immediately. Adrian walked closer this time without breaking eye contact. You take care of her alone? Ethan stiffened instantly. That is none of your business. Adrian stopped several feet away. No parents? Ethan looked away first. Just us. The storm rattled the windows again. Ethan suddenly became painfully aware of how exhausted he felt. He had been working 14 straight hours before the crash downstairs even happened. His wet clothes clung uncomfortably to his skin. His head hurt. And underneath all of it, the suppressants continued wearing off faster by the minute. Adrian noticed that too. Of course he did. You are overheating. Ethan's eyes widened slightly. I am not. Adrian's voice remained frustratingly calm. Your pulse accelerated 10 minutes ago. Your pupils are dilated. And your scent is changing. Panic slammed through Ethan's chest. He immediately stepped backward again. Stop talking about my scent. Adrian's gaze darkened slightly at the fear in Ethan's voice. Who prescribed your suppressants? Ethan froze. What? The dosage you are using is too strong. Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. Long-term use at that level causes instability. Ethan's mouth went dry. How would you know that? Silence. Adrian looked at him steadily for several seconds before answering. Because I recognized the chemical composition the moment I walked near you downstairs. Ethan stared at him in disbelief. That is impossible. No, Adrian said quietly. It is not. Lightning flashed outside again, illuminating the room in silver for one sharp second. Ethan's breath caught when Adrian stepped even closer into the light. Tell me something honestly, Adrian said softly. What exactly are you hiding from? Ethan's throat tightened painfully. Because. The terrifying part was that he no longer thought Adrian was asking out of curiosity. He sounded like someone already searching for an answer. The question lingered in the penthouse long after Adrian stopped speaking. Ethan could still feel it pressing against his chest like invisible weight. What exactly are you hiding from? Nobody had ever asked him that before. Most people never looked closely enough to notice there was anything to hide at all. Ethan forced himself to break eye contact first. I am not hiding from anything. Adrian's expression did not change. Another lie. Ethan exhaled shakily and rubbed his damp hands against his jeans. You do not even know me. No, Adrian said quietly. But I know fear when I see it. Thunder rolled again outside, low and distant this time. The storm had settled into something heavier over the city. Rain lashed endlessly against the windows while emergency sirens echoed faintly far below the tower. Ethan moved toward the glass carefully, desperate for distance from the Alpha standing behind him. 47 floors below, downtown Chicago looked almost submerged beneath sheets of rain and blinking emergency lights. Cars barely crawled through flooded intersections. Somewhere down there was his tiny apartment with peeling paint and weak heating, and Lily probably curled beneath 3 blankets pretending she was not worried. Ethan suddenly felt very small standing inside Adrian Vale's enormous penthouse surrounded by polished marble and city lights worth more than his entire future. Your phone battery is dying, Adrian said behind him. Ethan looked down automatically. 3% left. Great. Perfect. Adrian walked past him toward a sleek control panel built into the wall. You can charge it here. Ethan hesitated before following carefully. The closer Adrian moved, the more impossible it became to ignore his scent. The suppressants in Ethan's bloodstream were barely holding together now. He could feel the instability building underneath his skin like static electricity. His senses sharpened too much. Every sound clearer. Every scent stronger. Every instinct louder. Dangerous. Adrian plugged Ethan's phone into the charging port without another word before glancing toward the windows again. Road closures just expanded another 6 blocks. Ethan looked over sharply. How do you know that? Adrian nodded toward one of the massive screens mounted along the far wall. Live city traffic maps glowed across it in red warning lines. Flood alerts flashed continuously along the bottom. Ethan stared at the screen in disbelief. You monitor the entire city from your office? Parts of it. That should not have sounded normal. Somehow from Adrian Vale, it did. Ethan leaned tiredly against the edge of the marble counter. His body ached from the long shift, the storm, the stress, all of it crashing into him at once now that adrenaline was fading. Adrian noticed immediately. You have not eaten. Ethan blinked. What? Since early afternoon? Ethan stared suspiciously. Are you psychic too? Adrian's mouth almost curved upward again. Almost. You get lightheaded every few minutes. Ethan hated that he was observant enough to notice things like that. Before Ethan could answer, a soft chime echoed through the penthouse. Adrian glanced toward his phone screen briefly. His expression cooled instantly. What? Ethan asked cautiously. Adrian did not answer right away. Instead, he walked toward the window overlooking the flooded streets below. Someone downstairs is asking security questions about the delivery driver who entered the building tonight. Ethan's stomach dropped so hard it physically hurt. What? Adrian looked back at him slowly. Male alpha. Mid-30s according to security. Ethan's pulse exploded instantly. No. No. Adrian noticed the panic flooding across Ethan's face immediately. You recognize the description. It was not a question. Ethan stepped backward before he even realized he was moving. I need to leave. Adrian's gaze sharpened dangerously. Who is he? Ethan shook his head quickly. Nobody. That reaction says otherwise. Ethan's breathing turned uneven. His fingers curled tightly against his sleeves as cold dread spread through his chest. Marcus. It had to be Marcus. How had he found him downtown? Ethan had blocked his number months ago. Moved apartments. Changed work schedules. Ethan. Adrian's voice cut through the panic sharply enough to make him look up again. Who is downstairs? Ethan swallowed hard. An old mistake. Adrian stared at him for several long seconds before speaking again. Do you want security to remove him? Ethan almost said yes instantly. But fear stopped him. Marcus never handled rejection well. The last thing Ethan wanted was more attention drawn toward himself. Especially not from another alpha connected to his past. No, Ethan answered quietly. If he realizes I am here, he will eventually leave. Adrian's expression darkened slightly at that wording. Eventually. Ethan looked away again. Please just do not tell anyone I am here. Silence filled the room. Then Adrian walked toward the desk and pressed one button on the control screen built into the surface. Nobody enters this floor without my authorization, he said calmly. Including security. Ethan stared at him. You did not have to do that. Adrian's eyes met his steadily. Yes, he said softly. I did. Something dangerous shifted low in Ethan's stomach at the words. Not attraction exactly. Worse. Safety. He had spent so long surviving alone that the feeling almost frightened him more than Marcus downstairs. Adrian Vale was the kind of man who changed entire rooms just by entering them. The kind people obeyed without question. The kind Ethan should stay far away from if he wanted a normal life. So why did standing here inside this penthouse suddenly feel safer than home? Ethan immediately hated himself for the thought. Another sharp pulse of dizziness hit him without warning. He caught himself against the edge of the counter hard enough to rattle the glass sitting beside him. Adrian closed the distance instantly this time. Easy. Ethan stiffened when Adrian's hand hovered near his arm without touching him. Even that tiny distance between them made Ethan's pulse spike harder. Adrian noticed. Of course he noticed. Gray eyes narrowed slightly as he studied Ethan's face. Your suppressants are crashing. Ethan's throat tightened. I know. How long since your last stable dosage? Ethan hesitated too long. Adrian's expression cooled immediately. How long? Almost 2 days. Silence. Heavy silence. Then Adrian spoke in a dangerously calm voice Ethan somehow feared more than anger. That level of suppressant withdrawal can destabilize omega pheromones completely. Ethan forced out a weak laugh despite the panic crawling through him. Well, that sounds dramatic. Adrian did not smile. Ethan, he said quietly, you should already be in a medical facility right now. The words settled heavily between them. You should already be in a medical facility right now. Ethan stared at Adrian across the marble counter while the storm raged against the windows behind him, and for the first time all night, genuine fear outweighed his instinct to run. Not because Adrian sounded threatening. Because he sounded certain. Ethan forced a weak shrug even though dizziness still rolled through his body in waves. I am fine. Adrian looked completely unconvinced. Your body temperature is elevated. It is called stress. Your pulse is unstable. You are making me nervous. And your scent is fluctuating every few minutes. Ethan immediately stiffened. Stop saying that. Adrian studied him quietly. You react to that word like it frightens you. Ethan laughed once under his breath, tired and humorless. Because it does. Silence followed. Adrian moved toward the built-in kitchen along the far side of the penthouse while Ethan stayed near the windows, trying to breathe normally. The city below looked darker now. More roads swallowed by flooding. Emergency lights flashed endlessly through the rain like distant red stars beneath the storm clouds. Ethan rubbed at the edge of his scent patch again, panic tightening in his chest when he realized the adhesive had nearly peeled away completely. He needed another blocker. Another suppressant dose. Something. Before things got worse. Sit down, Adrian said without looking at him. Ethan frowned slightly. Why? Because you nearly collapsed 5 minutes ago. Ethan opened his mouth to argue, then immediately lost balance when another dizzy spell hit harder than before. He caught himself against the edge of the couch with a muttered curse. Adrian looked over. Instantly. Sit. This time Ethan obeyed. Mostly because his legs suddenly felt unreliable. The couch itself was ridiculously soft, the kind of furniture Ethan had only seen in luxury magazines left behind at laundromats. Adrian placed a glass of water and a small plate of food on the low table in front of him. Ethan stared suspiciously at the neatly arranged sandwich and fruit. What is this? Food. I know that. Adrian remained standing nearby, sleeves rolled slightly past his wrists now, dark hair still faintly damp from the storm earlier. You are hypoglycemic. Ethan blinked slowly. You diagnosed that by staring at me? Partially. Ethan took the glass carefully. You are weird. Adrian accepted that statement with unsettling calm. Eat. Ethan realized suddenly how hungry he actually was. He had not eaten anything except cold fries since noon. Still, suspicion lingered. Why are you helping me? Adrian's gaze remained fixed on him for several quiet seconds before he answered. Because something is wrong. Ethan looked away first. He hated how easily Adrian noticed things. Most people spent years overlooking him completely. Adrian Vale had known him less than 2 hours and somehow kept seeing straight through every wall Ethan built. Ethan picked at the sandwich slowly while trying not to think about the alpha still watching him from across the room. Unfortunately, that became impossible when his body reacted again. Heat flooded suddenly beneath his skin, sharp and disorienting. Ethan's breathing caught hard enough to make Adrian narrow his eyes immediately. Ethan! Do not! Ethan muttered quickly, gripping the edge of the couch cushion. Do not start analyzing me again. Adrian moved closer anyway. Your pupils just dilated. Fantastic. And your scent changed. Ethan closed his eyes briefly in frustration. Please stop saying that like we are on some nature documentary. Something dangerously close to amusement flickered across Adrian's expression again before fading. You use humor when you panic. Ethan stared at him. Do you psychoanalyze everyone or am I getting special treatment? Adrian did not answer directly. Instead, he crouched slightly near the coffee table so their eye levels matched for the first time all night. The movement should not have mattered. Somehow it did. The pressure in the room shifted subtly the closer Adrian got. Ethan's pulse stumbled unevenly again. How long have you been taking illegal suppressants? Adrian asked quietly. Ethan's stomach dropped instantly. They are not illegal. Adrian said nothing. That silence alone told Ethan enough. Fine, Ethan muttered. Mostly illegal. Where did you get them? Online. Adrian's expression darkened immediately. That was reckless. Ethan laughed bitterly. Welcome to being broke. Adrian went still at the answer. Ethan looked down at the untouched half of the sandwich in his hands. Prescription suppressants cost money. Specialists cost money. Insurance costs money. He swallowed hard before continuing more quietly. People like me do what we can afford. The room fell silent except for the storm outside. Adrian stared at him differently now. Less clinical. More focused somehow. Ethan hated that too. You should not have to hide yourself that aggressively just to survive, Adrian said finally. Ethan's chest tightened unexpectedly at the calm certainty in his voice. You say that because you live up here. He gestured vaguely toward the massive penthouse around them. You do not know what it is like down there. Adrian's gaze never left his face. Then tell me. Ethan almost laughed again. Nobody had ever asked him that before either. Before he could answer, a sharp chime echoed through the penthouse again. Adrian stood immediately, expression cooling back into something unreadable. He checked a notification on his phone. Ethan watched the subtle shift happen in real time. Predator calm. Controlled. Dangerous. What? Ethan asked quietly. Adrian's eyes lifted slowly from the screen. Your friend downstairs just triggered another security alert. Ethan's stomach twisted instantly. Marcus? Adrian walked toward the window overlooking the lower entrance plaza. He is arguing with security now. Ethan stood too quickly from the couch and immediately regretted it when dizziness hit again. I need to leave before he realizes I am here. Adrian turned sharply toward him. Absolutely not. Ethan froze slightly at the sudden authority in his voice. Adrian stepped closer again, gray eyes colder now than at any point tonight. The roads are flooded. Your suppressants are unstable. And the alpha downstairs is actively searching for you. Ethan swallowed hard. You do not understand. Then explain it. Ethan looked away toward the storm-dark skyline again. His voice came out barely above a whisper. Marcus does not take rejection well. Silence. Heavy silence. Then Adrian asked softly, Is he the reason you hide your scent? Ethan did not answer. He did not need to. Because the moment Adrian Vale saw the fear cross his face, something dangerous settled quietly into the alpha's expression. And somehow that frightened Ethan even more. For several long seconds neither of them spoke. Rain hammered against the glass walls of the penthouse while the city below drowned beneath flashing emergency lights and flooded streets. Ethan stood near the couch with his pulse racing unevenly in his chest, and Adrian Vale watched him with an intensity that felt impossible to escape from. Ethan regretted answering honestly the moment the silence changed. Adrian's expression had gone colder after hearing Marcus's name. Sharper somehow. More focused. How long has he been following you? Adrian asked quietly. Ethan looked down at the floor instead of answering immediately. On and off for almost a year. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. And security never reported this before? Ethan let out a tired laugh. People like Marcus know how to act normal in public. But not in private. Ethan's silence answered for him again. Adrian stared at him for another moment before turning toward the massive windows overlooking downtown. His reflection stretched dark against the storm outside. Tall. Still. Controlled in a way that made the entire room feel centered around him. You should have filed a protection order. Ethan almost smiled at how simple Adrian made it sound. Against an alpha with 3 cousins in local law enforcement? Adrian glanced back sharply. That should not matter. It does where I live. Ethan rapped, his arms loosely around himself, suddenly cold despite the warmth spreading beneath his skin from the suppressant crash. People hear Omega and immediately start asking questions I cannot afford to answer. Adrian's gaze moved briefly toward the loose scent patch barely clinging beneath Ethan's collar now. So you hid instead. Ethan swallowed hard. I survived. The storm thundered again overhead. Adrian walked toward the kitchen area in silence before opening one of the sleek black cabinets built into the wall. Ethan frowned slightly when Adrian removed a small silver medical kit from inside. What is that? Emergency stabilizers. Ethan froze instantly. Adrian placed the kit carefully on the marble counter between them. Corporate medical regulations require alpha suppressants and omega stabilizers in all executive buildings. Ethan stared suspiciously at the silver case. You just casually keep medical-grade omega medication in your kitchen? Adrian looked unimpressed. This is not a kitchen. Ethan blinked once. Right. Sorry. Billionaire penthouse survival bunker. Adrian ignored that entirely while opening the kit. Inside were rows of sealed medication packets, diagnostic scanners, and injector pens far more advanced than anything Ethan had ever seen in person. Ethan immediately stepped backward. No. Adrian looked up calmly. No. I am not taking random injections from a billionaire I met 2 hours ago. Fair concern. Adrian removed a small scanner instead. Then let me at least verify your condition first. Ethan stiffened instantly when Adrian stepped closer. You are seriously carrying medical scanners around your house. You are seriously pretending your condition is stable. Ethan opened his mouth to argue again, but dizziness slammed through him so suddenly this time that his knees nearly gave out beneath him. Adrian crossed the distance immediately, and caught his arm before he hit the floor. The contact lasted barely a second. It still felt like lightning moving straight through Ethan's nervous system. His breath caught sharply. Adrian froze too. Silence crashed into the room. Ethan became painfully aware of every place Adrian's hand touched. His sleeve through the soaked fabric of his jacket. Warm. Steady. Dangerous. Adrian released him immediately, but his expression had changed again. Darker now somehow. Focused entirely on Ethan in a way that made his pulse spike harder. You are burning up, Adrian said quietly. Ethan stepped back again on instinct. I told you I am fine. Adrian's gaze narrowed slightly. Your body disagrees. Ethan pressed trembling fingers against his own forehead. Heat radiated beneath his skin now in uneven waves. Great. Perfect. Exactly what he had been terrified of all night. I just need another suppressant dose, he muttered. Adrian's expression immediately sharpened. From where? Ethan looked away. There is a pharmacy in Bridgeport. At 2 in the morning. During a flood emergency. Ethan stayed silent. Adrian's voice lowered slightly. You do not even have a prescription, do you? Ethan hated how easily Adrian figured things out. Not anymore. Another long silence settled between them. Adrian placed the scanner back inside the medical kit slowly before closing it again. Who was prescribing them before? Ethan hesitated. A clinic. Name? It closed. Adrian stared at him steadily. Closed or shut down? Ethan's throat tightened. There is a difference. Adrian's silence answered that question clearly enough. Ethan looked down at his shaking hands again. The doctor did not ask questions. That was enough for me. Adrian's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. And he overmedicated you instead. Ethan laughed weakly. At least it worked for a while. No, Adrian said quietly. It hid the problem until your body started collapsing under it. The words landed harder than Ethan expected. Because deep down, he already knew Adrian was probably right. He had ignored the headaches, the dizziness, the instability creeping in over the last few months. Survival always came first. Medical consequences came later. Another sharp chime interrupted the silence again. Adrian checked his phone instantly. Ethan's stomach dropped the second Adrian's expression cooled completely. What now? Adrian's gray eyes lifted slowly toward him. Your friend downstairs just tried bribing security. Ethan went pale immediately. Marcus knows somebody let me upstairs. Adrian's jaw tightened faintly. Apparently. Panic surged hard enough to cut through the haze clouding Ethan's head. I need to go before this gets worse. He moved quickly toward the elevator hallway despite the dizziness pulling at his balance. Adrian blocked his path almost instantly. Not aggressive. Just immovable. Ethan stopped short. Move. Adrian's voice remained calm. No, Marcus will not leave. Good. Ethan stared at him in disbelief. Good? Adrian stepped slightly closer, tall enough now that Ethan had to tilt his head back to maintain eye contact. Because if he is still downstairs, Adrian said softly, then I know exactly where he is. Ethan's pulse stumbled unevenly again. Not from fear this time. Something else. Something far more dangerous. Adrian's expression darkened slightly as if he noticed the shift immediately. You are staying here tonight, he said calmly. That is not a suggestion. The room fell completely silent after Adrian spoke. You are staying here tonight. That is not a suggestion. Ethan stared at him across the dimly lit penthouse while thunder rolled through the city outside like distant waves crashing against glass. Adrian had not raised his voice once all night. He never needed to. Something about the way he spoke made resistance feel strangely pointless. Ethan hated that feeling immediately. You cannot just decide that for me, Ethan said quietly, even though his voice lacked confidence now. Adrian remained standing directly between him and the elevator hallway, tall enough to block the entire path without effort. I already did. Ethan let out a disbelieving laugh. Do you hear yourself? Constantly. That is somehow worse. For one brief second, Adrian's expression almost softened again before returning to calm control. Ethan rubbed both hands over his face tiredly. His head throbbed harder every minute now. The heat beneath his skin had spread into something heavier, more disorienting. His suppressants were crashing fast. Too fast. And Adrian kept getting closer every time Ethan tried creating distance. The worst part was that some instinctive part of Ethan's body no longer wanted him to move away at all. That terrified him more than Marcus downstairs. Adrian studied him carefully for another long moment before finally stepping aside from the hallway entrance. Fine, he said calmly. Ethan blinked in surprise. What? If you still want to leave after seeing the roads outside, I will not physically stop you. Ethan narrowed his eyes suspiciously. That sounds manipulative. Adrian gestured toward the windows. Reality usually is. Ethan hesitated before walking carefully toward the glass wall overlooking downtown Chicago. The view stole his breath immediately. Floodwaters swallowed entire intersections now. Emergency vehicles crawled through knee-deep water beneath flashing lights while wind hammered violently against the sides of nearby skyscrapers. The river had spilled beyond its normal banks completely. Ethan stared in disbelief. Oh. Adrian's voice remained calm behind him. Exactly. Ethan swallowed hard. Even if he somehow reached his scooter downstairs, driving through this storm would be impossible. And Marcus was still somewhere inside the building searching for him. Ethan suddenly felt trapped in a completely different way. Adrian seemed to sense the exact moment that realization hit. There is a guest suite on the opposite side of the penthouse, he said quietly. You can stay there until the weather clears. Ethan crossed his arms defensively. And if I say no? Then you will continue standing here exhausted, unstable, and one dizzy spell away from collapsing onto my floor. Ethan opened his mouth to argue again before another wave of heat rolled through him so sharply that his knees weakened instantly. He caught himself against the edge of the glass wall with a sharp inhale. Adrian crossed the room immediately. Easy. Ethan stiffened when Adrian stopped directly beside him this time. Too close. The scent surrounding the Alpha hit harder now at this distance. Cedarwood. Smoke. Something warm underneath that wrapped strangely around Ethan's senses like gravity itself. Ethan's breathing turned uneven. Adrian noticed instantly. Gray eyes narrowed slightly. You are getting worse. Ethan forced himself backward again. Do not start. Adrian ignored that completely. Your temperature is rising faster now. Please stop monitoring my body like a medical documentary. Adrian's gaze stayed fixed on him. You are trembling. Ethan looked down in frustration. He was barely noticeable, but enough that Adrian caught it anyway. Of course he did. Ethan leaned heavily against the wall behind him and closed his eyes for 1 second too long. The room tilted slightly when he opened them again. Adrian's voice lowered. Ethan. I know. Ethan muttered weakly. I know. Silence settled between them again. Not hostile this time. Just heavy. The storm outside softened slightly into steady rain instead of violent thunder, leaving the penthouse wrapped in low city light and quiet tension. Ethan finally looked up again. Why are you doing this? Adrian did not pretend not to understand the question. Doing what? Helping me. Ethan swallowed hard. You do not know me. I ruined your suit. Crashed into your lobby. Brought some psycho alpha into your building. Adrian's expression remained unreadable. And? Ethan stared at him helplessly. Normal people would have thrown me out hours ago. Adrian went quiet for several seconds before answering. I stopped being normal a long time ago. The honesty in his voice caught Ethan off guard enough to silence him completely. Adrian walked toward the kitchen again before returning with another glass of water and a folded black sweatshirt. Ethan frowned slightly. What is that? Dry clothes. Ethan stared down at his soap delivery uniform. Right. He had almost forgotten he was still freezing cold beneath the overheating waves caused by the suppressant crash. Adrian placed the sweatshirt beside him carefully. The guest bathroom is through that hallway. Ethan hesitated before taking the fabric. It smelled faintly like Adrian. That should not matter. Somehow it did. Ethan immediately hated how his pulse reacted. Adrian noticed again. Of course he did. You are very expressive for someone who spends his life hiding things, Adrian said quietly. Ethan looked away quickly. You notice too much. Adrian's gaze stayed on him steadily. Only when something matters. The words settled dangerously low in Ethan's chest. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed suddenly from the charging dock across the room. Ethan immediately grabbed it. One unread message. Unknown number. Ethan's stomach dropped the second he opened it. I know you are in the tower. Panic hit so hard his hands went numb. Adrian noticed instantly. What happened? Ethan could barely breathe suddenly. Another message appeared immediately beneath the first. You always hide when you are scared. Adrian crossed the room fast enough that Ethan barely registered the movement before the Alpha stood beside him reading the screen over his shoulder. The entire atmosphere inside the penthouse changed instantly. Cold. Focused. Dangerous. Ethan looked up slowly. Adrian's expression had gone completely unreadable now. That somehow frightened Ethan more than anger ever could. Adrian took Ethan's phone carefully from his trembling hands before locking the screen. You are definitely not leaving tonight, he said softly. Then he looked directly toward the elevator hallway beyond the penthouse entrance, gray eyes colder than the storm outside. And neither is he. The penthouse suddenly felt smaller after the messages appeared. Ethan stood frozen near the charging dock with Adrian beside him, the city storm raging beyond the glass walls while panic tightened around his lungs hard enough to hurt. Marcus knew he was here. Somehow he knew. Ethan rubbed both hands shakily over his face. He should not know this building. Adrian remained unnervingly calm beside him. People with unhealthy obsessions tend to learn things quickly. Ethan looked toward the elevator hallway instinctively. Every survival instinct inside him screamed to move. Hide. Leave. Run anywhere else before Marcus reached this floor somehow. Adrian noticed immediately. Relax. Ethan let out a disbelieving laugh. You cannot seriously say that after reading those texts. Adrian's gray eyes stayed fixed toward the penthouse entrance. Nobody gets past my security. You sound very confident. I am. The certainty in his voice should not have calmed Ethan even slightly. Somehow it did anyway. Ethan hated that. Adrian handed the phone back to him carefully. Block the number. Ethan stared down at the screen. More messages had already appeared. I saw your scooter outside. We need to talk. Ethan's stomach twisted sharply. Marcus always said that before things got bad. Adrian noticed Ethan's expression darken again. How long were you together? Ethan flinched slightly at the question. We were not together. Adrian remained silent, waiting. Ethan exhaled shakily. I knew him before I moved downtown. He looked toward the rain-covered skyline. Back when I still thought people meant what they said. Adrian listened without interrupting. Marcus was charming at first. Ethan continued quietly. Funny. Protective. He liked that I stayed quiet. A bitter smile crossed Ethan's face briefly. Turns out controlling people usually do. Adrian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Ethan leaned against the edge of the counter again, exhausted. The first time he found out I was using suppressants, he got angry because I hid it from him. His fingers curled tightly around the phone in his hand. After that, he started acting like my scent belonged to him. Silence settled heavily between them. Adrian finally spoke. And when you left? Ethan laughed softly without humor. He decided that was not my choice to make. Another message buzzed onto the screen. You cannot hide behind rich people forever. Adrian's expression cooled instantly the second he saw it. Ethan locked the phone quickly and shoved it face down onto the counter. I should not have come into this building. Adrian looked at him sharply. You did not choose this. I literally crashed into you carrying pizza. And now you are here. The words landed strangely harder than they should have. Ethan looked away first. The heat beneath his skin continued worsening steadily. His soaked clothes clung uncomfortably to him, while waves of dizziness rolled through his body every few minutes now. Adrian noticed every single symptom. You need to change clothes. Ethan blinked. What? Adrian gestured toward the black sweatshirt still folded nearby. You are still soaked. Ethan looked down at himself. Right. He had almost forgotten. Everything tonight felt unreal enough already. Adrian pointed toward the hallway beyond the kitchen. Guest suite is the second door on the left. Ethan hesitated. Adrian raised one eyebrow slightly. I promise the towels are not dangerous. Ethan almost smiled despite himself. Almost. You are weirdly calm about all this. Adrian's gaze stayed fixed on him steadily. Panic is rarely productive. Ethan shook his head slowly before finally taking the folded sweatshirt. The fabric felt soft and warm in his hands. Expensive too, obviously. Everything inside this penthouse probably cost more than Ethan's yearly rent combined. The guest suite looked larger than Ethan's entire apartment. Soft lighting glowed against dark wooden walls while rain streaked quietly across another massive window overlooking the city. Ethan stood alone in the middle of the room for several seconds trying to process how his life had somehow turned into this. 12 hours ago he had been delivering pizzas and arguing with his manager about overtime pay. Now he was hiding from a possessive alpha inside Adrian Vale's penthouse while his suppressants collapsed in real time. Ethan changed slowly into the oversized black sweatshirt Adrian gave him. It smelled faintly like cedarwood and clean winter air. The moment the fabric settled against his skin, his pulse reacted sharply again. Great. Fantastic. Apparently his instincts had chosen tonight to completely betray him. Ethan splashed cold water across his face in the bathroom sink and stared at himself in the mirror afterward. Pale skin. Exhausted eyes. Hair still damp from the storm. The scent patch beneath his collar had almost completely peeled away now. He carefully removed it entirely with shaking fingers. The second he did, panic hit hard enough to make him dizzy again. His natural scent immediately felt too exposed. Too vulnerable. Too real. Ethan gripped the sink tightly and forced himself to breathe through it. You are safe here. The thought appeared before he could stop it. Ethan froze at his own reflection. Safe. When was the last time he had actually felt that word? Another dizzy wave hit harder this time. Ethan closed his eyes briefly before stepping back into the bedroom. The moment he opened the guest suite door again, he realized Adrian was standing in the hallway outside. Waiting. Ethan startled slightly. You seriously stand outside guest rooms now? Adrian looked him over once carefully. The oversized sweatshirt hung loose against Ethan's smaller frame, sleeves covering most of his hands. Something unreadable crossed Adrian's expression for one brief second. You look less uncomfortable. Ethan leaned tiredly against the doorway. That is because I stopped smelling like rainwater and pepperoni. Adrian's gaze lingered on him another second too long. Then his eyes narrowed slightly. You removed the patch. Ethan instinctively touched the side of his neck. How can you tell? Adrian stepped closer slowly. Not enough to invade space. Just enough for the air between them to shift again. Ethan's pulse immediately stumbled harder. Adrian noticed. Of course he did. Because your scent changed the second you opened the door. Ethan's breath caught softly. The hallway suddenly felt very quiet. Very warm. Adrian's gray eyes remained fixed on him with unsettling intensity. Ethan, he said quietly, has anyone ever told you how strong your natural scent actually is? Ethan swallowed hard. No. Adrian's expression darkened almost imperceptibly. Then they were either lying, he said softly, or trying very hard not to notice. The hallway remained silent long after Adrian spoke. Ethan stood frozen in the guest suite doorway wearing Adrian's oversized black sweatshirt, while rain slid endlessly down the penthouse windows behind them. Nobody had ever spoken about his scent that way before. Most people either ignored it completely or treated it like something inconvenient. Dangerous. Something to suppress. Adrian Vale looked at him like it mattered. Ethan did not know what to do with that. He forced himself to break eye contact first. You say strange things. Adrian's voice stayed calm. Only when they are true. Ethan swallowed hard and stepped back into the room slightly, trying to create distance again. It no longer worked the way it had. Earlier tonight. Every time Adrian moved close now, Ethan's instincts reacted before logic could catch up. Heat spread low beneath his skin in uneven waves while his pulse refused to stabilize. Adrian noticed every single change. Of course he did. Your condition is worsening faster than I expected, Adrian said quietly. Ethan leaned against the edge of the doorway. You keep saying that like I am dying. You are not dying. Adrian's gray eyes stayed fixed on him steadily. But you are exhausted, overstressed, and chemically unstable. Ethan laughed weakly under his breath. That sounds like my entire 20s. Something softer flickered across Adrian's expression again before fading. Silence settled between them while distant thunder rolled over the city one final time. The storm outside had started weakening at last. Rain still covered the windows, but the violent wind had faded into steady midnight quiet. Ethan suddenly realized how late it actually was. Or early. The digital clock near the kitchen read 3:42 a.m. Adrian followed his gaze. You should try sleeping. Ethan immediately shook his head. I do not think that is happening tonight. Adrian leaned one shoulder lightly against the hallway wall across from him. Even relaxed, he somehow still carried the same overwhelming presence that controlled entire rooms without effort. Because of Marcus? Ethan hesitated before answering. Partly. Adrian waited. Ethan exhaled slowly. Mostly because I have no idea what is happening anymore. His voice came out quieter than he intended. 12 hours ago I was delivering pizzas and worrying about overdue rent. Now I am standing in your penthouse wearing your clothes while my ex stalks me through a flood emergency. Adrian's gaze never left his face. And? Ethan let out another tired laugh. And this feels insane. Adrian considered that calmly. It probably is. Ethan blinked in surprise. That is your reassuring response? Would you prefer dishonesty? Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again because somehow Adrian had a point. The silence afterward felt different than before. Less tense. Still heavy, but warmer now somehow. Ethan hated how quickly his body adapted to Adrian's presence. Dangerous. Very dangerous. His phone buzzed softly again from inside the bedroom. Ethan immediately stiffened. Adrian noticed. Do not answer it. Ethan nodded slowly before walking toward the bed where the phone sat charging on the nightstand. Another unknown message glowed across the screen. You always disappear when somebody stronger shows up. Ethan's stomach twisted sharply. Adrian stepped into the room behind him without making a sound. Still him? Ethan nodded once. Adrian's expression cooled immediately after reading the screen over Ethan's shoulder. Block every number he sends. Ethan looked down tiredly. He just makes new ones. Then change yours. Ethan laughed softly without humor. You really think people can just disappear that easily? Adrian went quiet. Ethan looked up at him again and immediately regretted it. Adrian stood too close now. Not touching. Somehow worse. The scent surrounding him wrapped through the room stronger than before, mixing with the faint traces of rain and warm city air drifting through the penthouse ventilation. Ethan's pulse reacted sharply again. Adrian noticed instantly. Gray eyes darkened slightly as he studied Ethan's face. Your instincts are responding to me now. Ethan's breath caught softly. Please do not say it like that. Adrian stepped no closer, but the space between them still felt dangerously thin. Why? Ethan looked away quickly. Because I already have enough problems tonight. Silence stretched heavily. Then Adrian spoke more quietly than before. I am not going to hurt you. The words landed harder than Ethan expected. Simple. Calm. Honest. Ethan realized suddenly that Adrian had never once touched him without permission all night. Never raised his voice. Never used his alpha presence to intimidate him, even though he absolutely could have. The realization unsettled Ethan almost as much as Marcus's messages. You barely know me, Ethan whispered. Adrian answered immediately. That does not change the answer. Ethan stared at him for several long seconds. Somewhere below the tower, the city continued moving through rain and floodwater and emergency sirens. But inside the guest suite, everything had gone strangely still. Adrian's gaze dropped briefly toward the side of Ethan's neck where the scent patch used to sit. Ethan's pulse jumped instantly at the movement. Adrian noticed that too. Of course he did. You are reacting again, Adrian said quietly. Ethan pressed one hand against his forehead in frustration. I cannot control it right now. Adrian's expression softened slightly for the first time all night. I know. The understanding in his voice nearly hurt more than panic. Ethan looked down at the sweatshirt's sleeves covering most of his hands. You know what the worst part is? Adrian stayed silent, waiting. Ethan laughed softly to himself. I should probably be terrified of you. Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. But Ethan swallowed hard before finally admitting the truth. I am not. The room fell completely silent after that. Adrian stared at him with an unreadable expression, while the final traces of storm clouds drifted slowly beyond the glass skyline behind him. Ethan suddenly became aware of how close they actually stood. How warm the room felt now. How steady Adrian's presence had become somewhere beneath all the fear and chaos and confusion tonight. Adrian spoke first. Quietly. Carefully. Then stay. Ethan's breath caught softly. Adrian's gray eyes remained fixed entirely on him. Just until morning, he added. Until the road's clear. Until the messages stop. Until you can think clearly again. Ethan should have said no. Every survival instinct he had spent years building should have forced him toward the elevator immediately. Instead, he looked at Adrian Vale standing quietly in the doorway of the guest suite and realized something terrifying. For the first time in a very long time, leaving no longer felt safer than staying.